Evercade is a series of consoles that allows players to enjoy arcade classics and other retro games in cartridge form since mid-2020, either portably or on the big screen at home. The latest system, the EXP, has been on the market for the last 8 or 9 months so far, and is touted as Blaze Entertainment's best iteration of the Evercade to date. There are plenty of reviews out for the EXP, and they're generally positive, but most of them are a snapshot of the system when it first came out. They mention a number of issues they experienced, such as the carts being difficult to remove, the lack of button mapping, various scaling and audio issues, amongst other things. If you're someone who waited a bit before considering one of these, can you expect these same problems to persist? In essence, how does the EXP fare today? Have any concerns from early reviews been addressed, or has it been put to the wayside? Hello fellow gamers, and you know, it is nice to check out a system made in Britain for a change. For a long time, I'd considered getting an Evercade, mulling over whether to get the Versus or the EXP. In the end, I decided to grab the EXP when Game had a 20% off sale in one of their stores back in early June. That meant I managed to nab the console, essentially with 2 free extra cartridges. Now while I explore the system to see how much has changed since its release, well, basically it's going to be a mini review, let's be honest. But the main focus are going to be those issues that were raised early in its life. Have those been addressed? And in order to answer that, I need to check out what the Evercade EXP offers players today. My initial thoughts upon taking it out of the box were positive. It felt good in the hands and it had a good grip to it. All the buttons, even the shoulder buttons, felt nice and responsive. The D-pad was a bit mushy though, but everything else felt good. Including using the cartridge slot. Very early reports of the EXP stated that it was difficult to insert and remove the carts. Blaze say they resolved this before the system went on sale, and I can happily confirm this is the case. The cartridge slides easily into the slot where it simply pinches onto its contacts for grip, and removing it requires little force. Booting the system up, I was a little disappointed in the screen. Now don't get me wrong, it's nice and sharp, and I'm sure it's better than the old Evercade as everyone says it is, but it doesn't seem to get very bright. Now that's perfectly fine for use indoors, but it would become an issue in bright conditions. This is in contrast to another portable gaming system that came out around about the same time, the RG35XX. In comparison to Ambernick's popular little imitation Game Boy, the EXP screen, well, it's kinda dull. Nevertheless, the viewing angles on this thing are pretty good, which is handy for a feature new to the Evercade line, TATE mode. One press of the little T button by the headphone jack and the whole screen is rotated 90 degrees to make it more suitable for taller games. It's a neat idea, and it certainly keeps fans of vertically scrolling shooters happy, but in honesty, I don't think most people are going to find this useful. It's also a little uncomfortable to use for more than a few minutes. The D-pad and AB buttons sit very low down on the unit when held in this orientation, which makes the system rather top heavy. There was something else I noticed about this screen, or more rather its bezel. When the indicator light on the bottom comes on, usually upon boot up or when there's low power, there's clear light leakage coming through the bezel. It certainly draws your attention, but at least that light isn't on all the time, right? However, there's more light leakage close to the headphone jack, and that's there all the time. This, you see, is another issue that early reviewers spotted, and so did I without even having to look for it. I definitely found this distracting. Putting those issues aside though, actually using the device itself feels wonderfully retro. You want to play a game? Simple. Insert a cart, pick a game, and you're off. Unlike the old systems from the 90s and earlier, carts in the Evercade are hot swappable, so you don't need to turn it off to change to a different game. In fact, just using the EXP just in general is delightfully uncomplicated. The menus are easy to navigate, you're not going to get lost in them, and there are plenty of options readily available. There are a number of menu themes to choose from, and also various different borders available to fill in the blank spaces on 4:3 ratio games. Though I tend to opt for no border at all. There are a couple of scanline options available as well to give your old games an even more retro look. Although I can't imagine why you'd want to do this when the screen doesn't get all that bright already. It might be best to reserve this for when you're playing it through your TV. Oh, didn't I mention? the EXP has a mini HDMI port to let you play your games on a larger screen. There's no HDMI cable included in the box, you'll have to source one of your own, but it looks pretty nice on a telly. The output is only 720p mind, but that's more than enough for playing many retro games. One feature the EXP brings that the original didn't have is built-in Wi-Fi. It sadly doesn't support 5G, only working with the already bloated 2.4 GHz frequency, but it's enough to get online to download system firmware updates. Thankfully, it looks like Blaze have been continuing to support the EXP since its initial release in December of 2022, with regular firmware updates addressing various different bugs that have cropped up over time. This is something that I'm really glad to see, and I'll explain in a bit my first-hand experience as to why that is. The UI of the EXP in general is mostly the same as that found on the Versus, the home console version of the system, but it has an extra party piece. The EXP icon in the menu reveals 18 pre-installed games spanning a wide range of Capcom classics. Titles such as Final Fight, Mega Man, Street Fighter and Ghouls 'n Ghosts can all be found here, and no cart is required to play them either. Speaking of built-in games, there are 6 hidden games in the EXP that you can unlock. There used to be 5, but just this month in August of 2023, they added a 6th one. Now, granted, most of these, after having tried them, didn't really interest me, but it's still nice to see that we're not limited to the original 5 games that came with the system. More can be added, and I eagerly await what else might come our way in the future. For the 6 currently hidden games, you can check out my pinned comment below to find out how to unlock them all. Something else you can find in this section is the Game of the Month. A feature initially introduced with the Versus, each monthly firmware update brings with it a new indie game that's brand new to the Evercade platform. You can play the game as many times as you like for free until you download the next firmware update, where the game is replaced with a new one. Now, personally, I would have preferred the option to save and keep each game rather than have them replaced each month, but the idea here is to give us all a taster of each game before Blaze releases all of them on a cartridge once the year is over. The current ones are going to be on the Indie Heroes Collection 3 release due in February 2024, at which point, hopefully, a new season of Game of the Month will start. Speaking of the games, when I picked mine up I got 3 cartridges chock full of them. IREM Arcade 1, which was already included in the box, Pico Collection 3 and Team 17 Collection 1. When I checked through each of these, I really liked how well they reproduced the classic era of gaming. Opening the box to reveal a card and finding a full colour manual inside explaining the games in full detail. I've had fun with a number of titles across all of these, though I will say not all of them were up my street. My favourites on them all so far have been Project X, 40 Winks and, of course, R-Type. Though, speaking of R-Type actually, when I was first trying out the EXP in early June, the game would just crash after a few seconds of play. I'd even downloaded the latest update prior to trying out any of these. Luckily, at some point in a subsequent update, this had been resolved. Proof that Blaze Entertainment are fixing bugs well after the system's initial release. Checking out the games in general actually allowed me to also confirm the audio-visual issues that early reviewers had reported. Now, one scaling issue does appear to still be there, but it's really more to do with the Evercade's original ratio setting, which is the default display option that fills the screen but maintains the game's aspect ratio. You have to really look closely to see it, but the scaling issue is there. Since it's so minute, I'm not bothered by it, but if you are, you'd be better off using the Pixel Perfect option instead. Though be warned, with some old games, that might make them look the size of a postage stamp. The audio is generally okay. The music and sound effects of all the games appear to be accurate, but there are some flaws. The audio on NES games and some arcade titles, for example, they sound a little crunchy. What do you think? Overall though, my main complaint would be a lack of bass across all the games. Project X, for example, has a thumping theme tune, but on the EXP, the bass definitely sounds suppressed. I hope this isn't something limited by the hardware and can be addressed in a firmware update in the future. However, something that Blaze has addressed in a firmware update is something that Evercade players have been screaming out for since day one: button remapping. Since an update in May, we've been able to adjust the button input on a game-by-game basis, so you can now remap them more to your liking. Blaze tells us it's not available for all games yet, but certainly every game I've checked had the feature enabled for it. so I guess it must just be excluded for a few outlying titles. So then, to summarise, what have they done to support their newest Evercade release since its launch? Well, they've certainly been releasing plenty of firmware updates, typically once a month, to fix various bugs in existing games and to further support newer releases. There's also Game of the Month, which was previously a Versus exclusive and was reintroduced since the EXP released. That would explain why early reviewers didn't mention this feature at the time. It looks to be an annual thing, and I hope Blaze continues this. They also gave players the improvement that everyone was asking for: button remapping. Now granted, it's still in beta at the moment and it isn't guaranteed for every game, but it is great to see that Blaze is listening to its audience. And all the while, they've been releasing new carts for the Evercade line in general. Since the EXP came out, a number of fresh carts have already been released, and this is probably the best way a system can be supported, with new software. There are even more games on the horizon, including one with Attack of the Petsky robots on it. Brand new games, not just old classics, are being released on this thing. What a great way to support today's developers! Though there is still one issue I'd like to see addressed, namely the sound quality. Fixing the audio issues with NES games and giving us a more richer sound across the board would be very welcome. But honestly, overall, I've been enjoying playing games on this. Though, I have to admit, I have been spoilt a little bit by my RG35XX. That took quite a lot of tinkering, but now it's a great way for me to play a huge chunk of my game library on the go. But the advantage the EXP has is in its simplicity. You buy a card, you put it in, you play, and you're done. Plus, you're supporting not only the platform, but potentially even today's developers by getting games for it. You're really going to need either an interest in retro gaming or want to relive some of the days of old to consider an Evercade, EXP or otherwise. But with updates every month and new cartridges coming out with plenty announced for the future, it looks like the Evercade is being very nicely supported. So if you want to scratch your retro itch and just want to play your old games without going down confusing rabbit holes, Evercade ain't a bad choice. But with that, I'm going to head off, so thanks very much for watching. Have you considered an Evercade for playing retro or indie games? And if so, which carts did you go for? Let everyone know down below in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, a like for the video is always appreciated, and there's always that subscribe button if you want to hear more from me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.